Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator, because, you know, there are no AM translators. Just wanted to tell you that. All right, welcome back to the program, and thank you for coming in this morning. A little crispy out here at the old radio ranch, about 31 degrees outside. Just a reminder that sometimes winter doesn't want to quit us They just can't let us go. They just can't. It's like a bad girlfriend that just keeps coming around over and over again. Not that I would know, but I mean, that's how it is. All right, it's Tuesday. What does that mean? That means we get to dive in, jump in hard, and start talking about all the good stuff. We have got a lot of things to cover this morning with our guest, Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's coming on board with us this morning to talk about, the weekly top three. It's the big three things that we get a chance to discuss each and every day. We're going to, or each and every Tuesday, we're going to dive into all those things and go over it. And we might as well start. Right now. So let's just, without further ado, let's bring Brad Keithley on board and see where he's at this morning. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. You always start the show with these great analogies. A bad girlfriend coming around again.
Like a bad girlfriend, man. You cannot get rid of her. I mean, throw all her stuff on the lawn and she still comes back. It's a horrible thing. All right, Brad. Well, the weekly top three should commence right about now. And let's get into it. Number one is, where are we headed from here? And could it get even worse? That's the question. Hit us with it this morning. Where are we at?
So Rob Myers did some of this yesterday on the show, but I sort of want to beat the drum a little bit more. I've been spending the last few days sort of looking at the spending that we're doing this session. You'll recall in the show last week, I said they've spent it all and even more than what they anticipated they would spend earlier in the session. And I've been looking at what the consequences of that are over the next 10 years, which is the usual budget cycle, forward-looking budget cycle that we use. And it's a bad picture, Michael. There's a chart I've done that will be in this week's landmine that looks at where we are in FY24 and then looks from FY25 forward. And FY24, I've got two segments in there. I've got the revenue line, which is from the spring revenue forecast at the top, the traditional revenues, and then looks at where we were at the start of the session and where we are now approaching the end of the session. And I've started looking at this in a somewhat different way than others have and that I have historically, which is how much is the deficit as a percent of the POMV draw? Because what we've seen the legislature do over the last 5 years, 6 years is use a leftover PFD approach, which is the PFD is whatever is left over at the end of taking money from the POMV, the percent of market value draw. And so I've started looking at the percentage of how much the deficit is as a percent of the POMV draw to try to get a sense of how much is left for the PFD at the end under the approach they've used over the last 5 years. And it really gets, this session is being underrated in terms of the amount of additional spending the legislature is layering on. It is every bit as much of a problem in this session as it was in the early 2010s in terms of the additional spending that they're doing. When you look at at FY24, the enacted budget, the budget that they enacted at the end of last year, Ledge Finance's analysis is that they left the building with UGF spending of about $5.26 billion rather, and had a projected deficit after traditional revenues of about $2.24 billion. That projected deficit represented about 64% of the POMV draw. This session alone, in terms of the supplemental, they've increased spending, FY24 spending, just through the supplemental. They've increased it by, they've increased it by 6%. And they've jumped FY24 spending from $5.26 billion, where it was when they left the building at the end of last session, to now $5.58 billion. They've added roughly another $300 some odd billion in spending. The deficit that at the end of the regular session last year was about 64% of the POMV draw for FY24 has now jumped to 73% for FY24. FY25, when Senator Stedman says we've spent it all, we're right up against the line, we're running right against the line, he's absolutely right. When Ledge Finance looked at the outlook for spending, the 10-year outlook for spending at the beginning of this session, they had FY25 pegged at 5.11, $5 billion, $100 million, with a projected deficit POMV draw of 63%. When you look at where they're ending up this session in terms of FY25, it's 8% higher than where legislative finance projected it at the beginning of the session. 8% higher at 5.5 billion, which is a 75% draw from the PFD or POMV in order to balance the budget. As Bert says, they're right up against the line, that their artificial 25-75 line of using the POMV. But that's not the really amazing thing or the really disturbing thing of what's going on. When you project out using legislative finance's projections of a percentage growth rate that they had, that they used in the initial analysis earlier this session, when you apply that to the new base of 5.5 billion that they're putting into the FY25 budget, and look across the years, you see, and I've got these numbers in red, you see the POMV draw, the portion of the POMV draw that has to go to that goes to covering the deficit, going from 73% in FY24 to 75% in FY25, and then to 80% in FY26, 27, 81% in FY28, and it continues to go upwards of there. In FY30, it reaches 86% and 86% in FY31. That leaves, I mean, this is simple arithmetic, right? If we continue to use the leftover approach to the PFD, that leaves only 20% in FY25 and FY26 for the PFD, and by FY30 and FY31 leaves only 14% available to the PFD. So they've spent a huge amount. As I say, the FY24 spending has jumped by 6% just through the supplementals. The FY25 has jumped by 8%, over 8%, since the projection given by LFD or Legislative Finance just in January, just 5 months ago. It's jumped 8% from where they anticipated FY25 would be. And then, you just extrapolate that out across the years, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And we may not be finished yet. In an ADN column analyzing the potential of layering on a new retirement plan, a new defined benefit retirement plan that the legislature is considering, and that the House is starting to move again. We have a discussion down in that column, or down in that article, that talks about what the cost of that could be. And here's I mean, the numbers that these people bandy about and just sort of treat them as pennies is amazing. The actuarial, we've talked about this before on the show, but the actuarial analysis that the legislature got at the beginning or at the end of last session about what the change to defined benefits could cost, said that it could cost the state more than $1 billion over the course of 14 years. As the Senate processed it, they did their own actuarial analysis and said, the cost would be less. But they had the numbers back into the actuary that the state normally uses for these things, and the actuary hadn't come back. They've now come back, and here's what Senator Giesel said. Part of the reason that the House was delaying working on this bill, on the defined benefit bill, is that they were waiting for those scenarios, the numbers, to come back. Well, we have those scenarios now. Giesel said they generally show that the cost of the pension plan will likely be below $1 billion for the 14-year period examined. Not zero, not a little bit, but below $1 billion. Still in that range that the actuaries were talking about before. Changing depending upon the number of current employees who switch from the defined contribution to the defined benefit plan. Well, the whole purpose of this is to get people to switch from the defined contribution to the defined benefit plan, and the number of employees who are enticed to remain in their jobs long-term by pension option. Well, the whole point of this is to get people to stay in their jobs. So if you take those assumptions as the actuaries did in the first analysis, it cost over $1 billion. Now they've refined it and it's a little bit under $1 billion, but that's still what we're talking about. And you jump back to these numbers that are in the chart and you look at the potential deficit amounts out there in the future of $2.74 billion, $3 billion, $3.16 billion, $3.24 billion. The line, the numbers right above the red, right above the percent of whatever the percent of market value that represents. When you look at those and you say, well, just a little bit more for pensions, maybe a little bit less than $1 billion over 14 years. Well, a little less than $1 billion is another $90 million, another $100 million per year over that period. And you just dig the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And you're taking more and more and more of the POMV to fund it. So I'll write a column on this at some point, but we have really understated the amount of additional spending that's being layered on by this legislature alone,
right?
And the impact of where that's leading us in the future.
Rob Myers says it's even worse than you're saying, Brad. You're only including what's currently in the budget. He says it's not counting a couple of bills expected to pass and the outstanding labor contracts. So
no, I've got those numbers in. I've got those numbers in now for FY25. What it's not including, what Rob's referring to is an analysis that Alexi Painter did from LFD did for Ways and Means, and that analysis sort of topped up some of the categories of spending for the current statutory requirements, for example, school bond reimbursement, and some of those other things. You can get it worse if you do that. They haven't included it in this budget, but if you do include those going forward, if you say next year we're going to go ahead and top up all those amounts that we should be spending, then you can make those numbers a lot worse. But I have restated this chart in order to incorporate the additional items that the legislature is doing in this session.
So we're going to be increasing the budget deficit by over $1 billion over the next 4 or 5 years, and then drawing it all out of the POMV. And that means, of course, it cuts right into the PFD. Rob was mentioning this yesterday, talking about, they're already talking about a PFD of only $500 or $600, 12, 13, 14%, because that's what they see. And again, they're going to consume every available dollar in the room. Final thoughts here on this one, Brad.
Well, we're not getting this under control. I mean, Bert will tell you that when it comes to Senate finance, they're hard-nosed and they look at spending and they keep it under control. They're not. They're adding to the problem. House finance is adding to the problem. Senate finance is adding to the problem. They're not keeping it under control. And if we don't look at other mechanisms to keep it under control, and frankly, I don't have much confidence in the spending cap, but if we don't look at other mechanisms to get this under control, it's just going to continue to spin. I mean, if you look at these numbers, it's just going to continue to spin farther and farther and farther out of control going forward.
Brad Keithley is our guest, The Michael Duke Show. We got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We'll return in just a moment. The weekly top 3 continues. We'll be hitting on number 2 in just a second. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break. Brad Keithley, our guest. Brian says, but folks just got to get reelected, Brad. You just don't understand. They got to get reelected, Brad. That's it, and that's really, again, part of what about Rob was talking about yesterday. If all we ever think of is in 1 year budget to budget increments, or every 2 years, 4 year election to election increments, this is what we get, right? I mean, this is the problem right here. We get a bunch of people who basically just say, don't worry, it'll be fine. Forget about that 10-year forecast. And you don't really need that PFD, period. That's essentially what's coming out of all this.
And the problem, Michael, is the terminology. The terminology they're using is encouraging this. So, for example, last year, at the end of last year, they left the budget. And they used 2575 to set the PFD, and they didn't spend all of it last year. So they called the remainder of it surplus. They called the remainder between what they appropriated and the amount of revenue at 2575. They called that surplus. So you had people during the course of the year saying, "Oh, there's a surplus. We get to spend the surplus." I mean, at one point, Elise Galvin wrote a column in the ADN that was signed on by all of the House minority that said, talking about K through 12 spending, and that they ought to override the governor's veto. And she said, "Well, there's a surplus, so what's the problem? We've got more money to spend." And even the terminology is creating problems. I mean, they get down there and they think, well, we've got a surplus, or we've got more revenues, or something's happened, and we can just keep spending. And all the pressures on spending. There's never, I mean, the way the setup is the spending all occurs one place, and then, we need to worry about revenues over here, but they're not meshed up. You get people who criticize. I remember during the course of the House committee sessions this year, especially in education, you had Jamie Allard, who would ask witnesses and ask other representatives who were proposing additional spending, who pays? The question that you and I have talked about on the show, who pays? And she got chewed out by Bryce Edgman at one point, saying, well, that's not a relevant question for this committee. We'll address that over in finance. We'll get to that when we get to finance. And so the entire setup down there, the use of the term surplus, the use of the structures, which, you aren't supposed to talk about who pays when you're considering additional spending in some of the committees. It's all set up not to keep the pressure on for spending. Bert's been on record saying, well, I'm gonna hold the line. We're the last ones in this committee that sees this stuff out. We're gonna hold the line. Well, they don't. They add to the problem. I mean, as we talked about on the show last week, the legislative finance presentation showed them that they were tapped out for FY25. All of the additional bills they had, all of the additional stuff they did was going to tap them out, bring them right to the line, right to POMB 2575. And yet Kelly Merrick, the senator from Eagle River, proposed an amendment that added more spending on top of that. So there isn't a sense of keeping this stuff under control. And I'm sure this will trigger a bunch of comments in the chat room, but part of the reason is the top 20%, all of the in which all of the legislators fall. The top 20% don't have to pay for any of it. They're pushing it all off on middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. And so who cares? We'll just take a little bit more out of their pockets.
Looking again back at this chart, I mean, this is like best case estimates, right? This is legislative finances. These are best case estimates. This is not any additional spending. Go ahead real quick, Brad.
Yeah, it's not any additional spending. The additional, I mean, and you can see the deterioration that goes on during the course of the year. FY25, legislative finance estimated it at spending at 5.11. By the end of this year, we're $400 million above that at 5.53. So it's best case.
This is not even worst case. This is just, this is the Pollyanna version of what we've got going on here. All right, we're jumping back in. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Well, as long as I'm a pain to the right people, that's all that matters. Maybe they'll feel it every time they sit down. Welcome back to the program. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, ak4sb.com if you want to find him on the web, or go argue with him on Twitter. He loves that. He loves to argue on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called these days. Brad, number 2 of the weekly top 3. And it's much ado about nothing, maybe, possibly, or maybe something good. I don't know. What do we got here?
Well, this is that refers to the Cook Inlet energy bills, the South Central energy bills that have been up before the legislature. We've had a lot of discussion about them in the legislature. We've had a lot of discussion about them on this show. And as we approach the end, and I sort of sit back and reflect on what's going on, I don't think we've moved the needle much in terms of solving this problem. I think the market is solving the problem on its own. And I think the legislative session has just sort of been a giant swirl around trying to intervene and control the market outcomes. There's 2 bills that are really out there now that address this, that are purported to address this problem. One is in the House, that the House voted on this past week, that includes things like regulation of storage, gas storage, and some other things involved in connection with the Cook Inlet problem. And then HB 50, I think it is, which is over in the Senate, which is now HB 50, which has now become sort of the omnibus bill on energy, as Senate resources sort of gathered in a bunch of other bills, put them in one bill to address the problem, and that bill is now before Senate Finance. That bill began as the carbon capture bill, the bill to authorize the state to lease portions of the mineral estate, portions of the subsurface estate to be used for carbon capture, but other things have been thrown on it in Senate resources. Cook Inlet seismic data, the ability to allow producers to have access to Cook Inlet seismic data that the state has in its records for no cost, in order to allow the producers to sort of evaluate new potential without incurring any additional cost. The gas storage facilities regulation, what the Senate's really done is taken the bill that the House just struggled through to pass on the floor. They've taken that bill and they've incorporated it in HB 50 with some changes from what the House passed, good changes in my opinion from what the House passed. The House passed a provision in its bill that essentially tried to bar utilities from owning LNG import facilities. In another step at the protectionism that you and I have talked about. If the utilities can't own LNG import facilities, then maybe they'll go buy Cook Inlet gas, even if at a higher price. The House barred that. The Senate bill doesn't do that. The Senate bill HB 50 incorporates Cook Inlet reserve-based lending, which I struggle with, but it allows ADA or the Alaska Energy Authority to loan money to producers when producers are having difficulty finding financing, loan money to producers in order to develop reserves. And it's reserves-based lending because the security, the collateral on the loan are the reserves. That sort of goes in a circle. I mean, the state owns the reserves already, right? I mean, we've leased them to the producers to develop. The producers are supposed to develop them. And now the state's saying, well, we'll loan you money. And if you don't develop them, we get the reserves back. So
we'll use our collateral to loan you money. I mean, that's exactly that makes zero. I mean, wow, that's a circle. I mean, wow.
So we will have bought them twice if we loan them money and then they default on the obligation. The one addition that the Senate made in Senate resources that I think is a plus, others won't, but I think it's a plus, is that Bill Wielechowski got an amendment done in Senate resources to undo the loophole that Hillcorp's been taking advantage of to avoid about $100 million in production taxes annually since they bought BP in the 20 teens. And that $100 million is money that it's a loophole that applies largely only to Hillcorp. Conoco pays the full taxes. Exxon pays the full taxes, but Hillcorp's getting off with paying about $100 million less because of the corporate structure they have. Wielechowski's amendment in Senate Resources closed that loophole and raises $100 million. That's part of the discussions you and I have had in the past about, how do we get more revenue? How should we get more revenue? And that's one of the ways. I think that $100 million that Hillcorp's been able to glean by its corporate structure is not justified. And I think Hillcorp ought to be paying at the same rate that the other producers are paying, same corporate tax rate that the other producers are paying. So that closure of that loophole, I think, is a big plus. Now, whether that survives, it was added in Senate Resources, whether that survives Senate Finance, and whether it survives when it gets on the Senate floor, and whether that survives the process of going back over to the House is another question. But I think it's a step forward that at least Senate Resources has adopted. And it's not, some people want to say, oh, it's a huge tax increase. Well, it's not. It's not a tax increase. It's a closure of a tax loophole. Yes, they will pay more in taxes, but they're just paying at the same rate under the same structure that the other corporations, Conoco and the other major corporations in the state, Conoco and Exxon and Santos will pay when it gets Pica online. It's the same basic corporate structure, and they're just closing that loophole. And so when AOGA goes around with ads saying, "Oh, we can't increase taxes on cook inlet production," well, it's not just on cook inlet production. It really, most of that $100 million is a benefit from Hillcorp's North Slope production, from the old BP production that it has. It's not related to the cook inlet. And B, it's not a tax increase. It's the closure of a tax loophole and pulling Hillcorp up to the same level as everybody else. I think the net is we're going to end this session, hopefully, without the major subsidies I've been concerned about, which is the waiver of royalty on cook inlet production, which is a subsidy to cook inlet producers and to cook inlet consumers, and hopefully the reserve-based lending, which is in the Senate bill before Senate Finance, but I continue to struggle with, because it is just this giant circle we're gonna loan on reserves that we already own. Hopefully that'll get stripped out at some point along the way, if the bill passes at all. This all may go down in flames. We may be back to where we started. But I think where we started was very simple. The market says imported LNG is the cheapest source of supply, the most secure source of supply, a source of supply which is competitive with cook inlet supplies. And the utilities ought to be pursuing the cheapest source of supply out there. We ought to get the cost of Alaska living down, or at least stabilized, as opposed to letting it explode, which is what these subsidies and what continually pursuing cook inlet production without regard to what the cost of it is would lead us.
So all this discussion, all this crisis, all this energy thing, I mean, was this all just sound and fury signifying nothing? Was it a just kind of this circle think on everything? Should they have just left it alone from the beginning? What's your take?
Well, politicians can't leave things alone. I mean, you got NSTAR saying there's a crisis. You've got all these scare tactics out there about we're running short of cook inlet gas. We're not running short of gas. There's a huge abundance of gas in the world that's accessible to South Central through imported LNG. But all of this crisis, politicians can't leave that alone. So yeah, it was probably necessary to go through this circle and explore things such as, well, let's waive royalty, let's subsidize and see if that solves the problem, or let's commit to loan money to these producers to see if that solves the problem. It's probably necessary to go through that circle to, sort of exhaust the remedies that people quickly, jump to. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to end up this session right back where we started, which is the Cook Inlet is unable to meet market demand over the long term. Production from the Cook Inlet is unable to meet market demand over the long term. And so we ought to be looking at alternatives. And if Cook Inlet, if producers can come forward with projects in Cook Inlet that can be lower cost than LNG, then great. Let's do that. Let's go out and get it. But let's not subsidize it at a greater cost to Alaskans. Let's not subsidize it to protect that market. Let's look for the lowest cost supplies. And I think that's where we're going to end up.
Well, and I think, again, it goes back to that emotional thing of, oh, we need Alaskan gas. Well, does that make sense? I mean, hey, we need Alaskan beef and we need Alaskan carrots and we need Alaskan. Sometimes that stuff is just not economically feasible. Sometimes it's better to bring it in than it is to try and develop it here. Would it be nice? I mean, from a security point of view, to make sure that we have it on hand? Sure, that would be great. But is it 3 times the cost? Can we afford to do that? Can people afford to stay here if that's what the cost is going to be? I mean, why the reticence, on the imported LNG, Brad? 1 minute.
Well, and the scare tactic around that is that, LNG is going to cost more. What people don't focus on is that Cook Inlet costs even more than that. That's what the analysis from last year from the utility working group told us, was that Cook Inlet, to develop additional Cook Inlet supplies, are going to cost even more than LNG. So prices are going up regardless. It just turns out that LNG, according to that analysis, LNG is the cheapest of the higher prices that have to be paid in order to keep the supply going.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're bumping up against the break. Quick tease for number 3, Brad.
Number 3 is Alaska's super socialists. I've heard an increasing amount, sort of, this goes in cycles, but I've heard more about people calling the PFD socialist, and Alaska's a socialist system because of the way we distribute the PFD. Well, there's something way beyond that. And we've got a category of super socialists in this state, and I'm going to talk about why that is.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Sorry. We have an abundance of Alaska BS. Can we export that? Nah, probably not. The world is awash in BS.
Sounds just BS.
We'll see what happens here. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Is it flammable? Depends on how much heat you apply to BS. It could be flammable. I mean, it will, if you dry it out, it makes a good cow pie. What are you going to do there? We could heat our homes with it. So much hot air and gas coming out of Juneau, we might be able to heat the whole state if we keep it up going on there. All right, Brad, let me go back here through some of the comments to see. Yeah, Rob is echoing my comments. He says, it's like me using your house as collateral for my mortgage. That's the development authority. I mean, we lease you the land that we own to develop gas on it, and then we're going to loan you money based on the reserves that you find, and we're going to keep. We already own it. It is such a circle jerk. I don't even understand how you could justify that.
It's really odd when you think about it, Michael. If the producer who has leased the land can't develop it, can't comply with the lease obligations to develop it, can't get financing or whatever else it is, can't move forward and develop it, then the way the system is supposed to work is the lease is supposed to revert to the state, so it can be leased to somebody else, right? And we can get money out of somebody else. What we're doing here, think about this. We've leased them the land. They can't develop it. It's supposed to come back to us, but rather than taking it back, we're going to give them more money in order to develop it. And if they fail to develop it, if they continue to do what they've done thus far, which is fail to develop it, then the security on our loan is we get the land back that we own anyway. It's just,
and had to pay millions of dollars out that we'll never see again. I mean, again, I'm all for supporting the businesses and doing development and all that, but I mean, that makes zero sense whatsoever. Now, I understand that the environmentalists and everything else have made the financing components difficult and all that, but at some point you just got to go, how much money do we have to throw after money to make it justified to develop it?
And the other thing, Michael, is if somebody owns a lease and they can't develop it and they're coming to the end of their term where they're going to have to give the land back, they'll sell it rather than just let it go poof. In terms of the value of the asset, they'll sell it to somebody to develop it, right? And there's a willing buyer out there in terms of Hillcorp who has Cook Inlet infrastructure, who could go buy that asset and develop it, who has financing in order to develop it, who's an existing Cook Inlet supplier who could go add that supply to their. But instead of doing that, instead of just saying, okay, let the market work, we have Republicans. I mean, Republicans are at the forefront of this. Republicans saying, "Oh no, don't do what the market normally has you do. Here, we'll give you more money in order to continue to prevent the market from operating." It's this whole reserve-based lending is just a giant. I don't know what the hell to call it. I mean, it's just a giant circle that's going on out there, and it's a circle jerk.
It's a circle jerk, Brad.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a self-licking ice cream cone where they just kind of consume everything while they're basically, again, it sounded fury signifying nothing. They're just consuming all the money in the meanwhile trying to find a solution for a problem, and in the end, they've consumed all the money and still not solved the problem.
Yeah,
that's what's going on.
And it's not, I mean, if we had a shortage of, I mean, to use your analogy, if we had a shortage of carrots in this state, we wouldn't go, spend a whole lot of state money. We shouldn't go spend a whole lot of state money in order to develop carrots. We would just go and order carrots from, outside markets, hopefully the cheapest market out there in order to supply ourselves carrots. Well, but this whole Cook Inlet gas deal just spun off into its own structure.
It's all based in emotion, right? I mean, at this point, because I mean, sure, it would be nice to have Alaskan gas, and we've got tons of it. We have trillions of cubic feet of gas up on the North Slope, and I'm sure there's millions or billions in the Cook Inlet somewhere, and it would be nice to find it. But what is the cost? What is the cost of it? If it's 2 or 3 times what it costs to import something, why would you do that? Simply for the security of knowing it's in your own backyard? Well, great, but in the meanwhile, you're paying 2 or 3 times the cost of that product, assuming that one day things are going to go, pear-shaped, and you'll be happy that it's there. In the meanwhile, you've expended thousands and millions of dollars in resources that you didn't need to.
And another thing about this, Michael, is that there's not a huge expectation that this is going to work, right? In the debate I had with John Sims on the Alaska landmine, one of the things Sims said toward the end of the debate that just stunned me was, well, Hillcorp said, Hex said, John Hendricks' company said, even if we, waive royalty, then they're still not going to develop. They need a loan in order to develop their property. So, we're going through all this without an expectation that's going to produce results at the end. But politicians at least seem to be doing something.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 3 is right now the super socialists. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
And we continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Brad Keithley is our guest from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It is the weekly top 3, and we're up to number 3 of the big 3. And this one is Alaska's super socialists. I am super socialism. Just peel it off, and he's got the big red hammer and sickle on his chest. What's going on here, Brad?
All right. So this past week, since I wrote the last landmine column, I've had a number of people pop up who saying, well, the PFD is socialist. All you're trying to do is preserve the socialist system of taking this free money that the legislature has and giving it to Alaskan families instead of using it for other purposes. Well, let's think for a moment about what the other purpose is of this free money. The free money does two things. One, it funds a PFD, permanent fund dividend, and then it funds something else. What it does is it protects Alaskans from having to pay taxes. I've called that in the past on the program and in columns, the tax avoidance dividend. Some people think about that, well, it goes to pay for government. Well, it does, but in the course of that, it protects Alaskans from having to pay taxes. That free money is being used to protect Alaskans from having to pay taxes. And who does that tax avoidance dividend help? Who does it protect? Well, it largely protects the top 20% who would otherwise have to pay some portion of the costs of government, which they don't using PFD cuts. It protects the oil companies from pressure to increase their tax levels to the amount that the state ought to be receiving from its resources. Something that we've talked about on the show before, $400 to $500 million, including the Hillcorp tax loophole. And it also protects non-residents and the industries that employ non-residents from having to pay taxes, and those industries from likely having to increase their wages to cover at least a portion of the taxes that the non-residents otherwise would pay. So that tax avoidance dividend is protecting a given class, the top 20%, the oil companies and non-residents. It protects them more than the PFD. It's a greater benefit to them than the PFD is to middle and lower income Alaska families. We did a calculation once in the landmine of how much that tax avoidance dividend is worth to the top 20%. And to the top 1%, it varies depending upon where you fall, what your income is in that top 20%. But to the top 1%, that tax avoidance dividend is worth about $100,000 in terms of the taxes that they avoid by reason of using the free money to pay for government, to avoid taxes, to cover the taxes that they would otherwise pay. So when we're talking about socialism and when we're talking about who benefits from this free money, and isn't it a bad thing that we have these PFDs, that we distribute this free money to Alaska families? We're also distributing this free money to the benefit of the top 20% in terms of the tax avoidance dividend, to the benefit of the oil companies, and to the benefit of non-residents in the industries that employ non-residents. And they are receiving a share of the benefit of that free money. Now, when Hammond originally constructed the PFD, it was 50% to be distributed as PFD and 50% to be used essentially for this tax avoidance dividend, to pay for government in lieu of taxes when circumstances required. Now that we've gotten to the point where we ought to be kicking into that third piece of Hammond's fiscal policy, the pay taxes when the other half of the permanent fund earnings are no longer sufficient to cover the cost of government, where people are supposed to pay taxes. Now that we've gotten to that third piece of Hammond's fiscal policy, what's happening is the top 20%, the oil companies and non-residents are saying, oh no, we still want no taxes. We still want the benefit of the tax avoidance dividend. Just take it out of the PFD. Just take more and more out of the PFD as you're going along. Reduce the share that goes to the benefit of middle and lower income Alaska families. Increase the share of the free money that's coming to us, to the top 20%, to the oil companies and to the non-resident industries employing non-residents by expanding the portion of the free money that's going to our benefit. To me, that's super socialism. What they're saying is, I know that the original structure was I was only supposed to get 50%, that 50% was supposed to go to the tax avoidance dividend to my benefit. I know that was the original plan. But now that we've come to the point where the next step kicks in, where I have to pay taxes to pay for the amount over the tax avoidance dividend, where I have to pay for additional costs of government over that, I want to keep my free ride going. And let's just take it more and more and more and more out of middle and lower income Alaska families through more and more and more cuts to the PFD. It's a zero-sum game. The free money's either going to the PFD or it's going to the tax avoidance dividend. And what's happened now is that we've gotten to the point where people ought to be paying taxes, where the original Hammond 50-50 plan, the original Hammond fiscal plan was that people ought to be paying taxes if we spend so much that we go above the other 50%. Now that we've gotten to that point, the super socialists are saying, no, give me more of that free money. Give me more of that free money. And
Right.
You know, and when you go back to the original, to the first segment on the show, and you look at that chart and you look at how much of the POMV now is going to be used to pay for government, think of that in terms of the tax avoidance dividend. We're going from 73% in FY24 to 75% in FY25 to 80% in FY26 to 86% in FY30. We're putting more and more and more into the tax avoidance dividend. Why? Because the top 20%, the oil companies and the non-resident industries, the industries that employ the non-residents, don't want to pay. So they want more and more of that free money to their benefit. If you're going to look at the PFD as socialism, let's be fair. The tax avoidance dividend is socialism also. And it's already bigger than the PFD in terms of its benefit to the top 20%. Now they want even more of it. The super socialists want even more of it.
My argument would be, what's more socialistic? Taking all the money, or taking a portion of the money, giving it to the people, allowing them to use it in the free market as they see fit, as the market would bear, or to take all that money and to give it to government to then build more government dependency, to build larger programs, to be everything to everybody. Which one of those two is more socialistic in the long run?
Yeah.
When government controls the means of production in everything, that's the definition of socialism. And we're seeing it now. I mean, the latest example is the childcare stuff, right? We're going to spend another $7 million on child. I mean, when they become everything to everybody, that is the definition of socialism.
It is, Michael. And who's pushing for that? I mean, we have people pushing for spending. Senator Kathy Giesel from South Anchorage is pushing for increased government spending on returning to defined benefits program. Julie Colomb, representative from South Anchorage, Republican representative from South Anchorage, is pushing for the child care spending. When you look at the people pushing for it, it's Republicans who want this increased socialism, this increased state spending, but they don't want to pay for it. They want to make sure that they, since they're all in the top 20%, and their donors don't have to pay for it, that they get the benefit of the free money by taking more and more and more of it out of the hands of middle and lower income Alaska families. It is socialism run amok, and the failure to recognize who the socialists are and who's benefiting from the free money and the amount they're benefiting from the free money is getting in the way of getting to a solution.
The proletariat are the ones that are benefiting. They're the ones with the Dachas out in the things and the big limousines and everything else, right? That's what it is. 90 seconds here, Brad. Give us your final thoughts for today on the weekly top three.
Michael, we've got to get spending under control. I mean, we've said we were going to do that. Bert said, trust me, I'll do it. I'll get it under control. It's not. It's spiraling out of control again at a rate faster than it did back in the early 2010s. We've got to get it under control. If we don't, the socialism that we just talked about, these sort of annex like, let's protect cook inlet production by subsidizing it and by giving them loans on things that we already own. That's just going to keep building and building and building. We've got to get spending constrained. And to me, the best way to do that is to make the top 20% responsible for a share of spending in a way that they haven't been, and thus doesn't lead them to help try to get these things under control.
Spending is the issue. Spending has been the issue. I've been saying that for 25 years. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Now we've had so much of a spending problem that we've created both a spending and a revenue problem. And yet they continue, as you said, oh, look, it's a surplus. We can spend it all. No, that's surplus. I mean, that's not a surplus. That's part of the people's PFD that you're now sucking up and doing, and that's the thing. It's Parkinson's principle, where everything expands to consume all available resources. They will expand to consume every available dollar, which is, one of the problems with giving them any more is that they're going to just consume it and keep going. That's how I see it. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you being part of it today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
You mean socialism benefits the politically connected the most? Shocking. We'll be back. Hour 2 is dead ahead. I mean, this is my problem, Brad, and this is why, I have not shied away from the discussion of taxes by any means, but this is my problem with the idea of, well, if we just put a tax in, we might fix this. They are going to basically, they will consume every available dollar. Now, maybe they'll feel the pain a little bit, but the overall feel is they're going to consume every available dollar out there and then want more when it's all said and done.
Michael, Hammond really thought through these issues. Hammond said, look, make politicians hurt, make them go for taxes for additional spending. They'll receive pushback and they won't spend those additional dollars. We've not done that. We have taxes in the form of PFD cuts, but those taxes only affect middle and lower income Alaska families. The top 20%, which all the legislators fall into, the top 20% aren't affected. They pay a trivial share. The oil companies aren't affected. Non-residents aren't affected. Not industries that employ non-residents, and those are powerful industries in this state. Fish industry, the tourist industry, they don't really pay. They get off with paying their employees less because their employees don't have to pay taxes. So they push back on, if they had to pay taxes, they would push back on spending. But right now, what's happening, since they don't have to pay taxes, they push for more and more PFD cuts because that's the way they look good. Their PR is good. Yes, we support K through 12 increases. Yes, we support, childcare. Yes, we support university spending. They look good. Their PR is good, but they don't have to pay for it. And until we get them included as part of the class that has to pay for the cost of government, pay a material share of the cost of government, as the middle and lower income Alaska families are doing now, until we push back on them and say, you have to pay, we're not going to get this stopped. And Bert's good words to the contrary notwithstanding, they just can't stop themselves. Even when Ledge Finance says you're done, you've spent it all, you're right at the 75% line. Kelly Merrick proposes an amendment. Kelly Merrick, a big part of the 20%, top 5% probably, says, oh, well, let's just spend a little bit more. That's where we've gotten to. And we've got to get a system where everybody's in this game. Everybody's included in having to pay up if the government continues to spend, so that everybody will push back and say, no, we can't afford that. We've spent enough. Take it out of something else if you need to spend it on this, but don't increase the overall spend.
And again, the problem is I just don't see how you stop that appetite, even if they're feeling it. I don't know. I don't see a solution to stopping the appetite to spend everything, because they know better than us how we should spend all that. They know better. They know what kind of programs we should create so that we're all dependent on them, so that they can get reelected, so that they can get more budgets for next year. And just the attitude of in almost indifference. I mean, when Rob was talking about trying to eliminate those PCN positions, 500 positions, and Bert Stedman says, well, they don't exist. But the money is still we just pay no attention to the man behind the curtain? Is that the whole thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, somebody else said, who was it? Keel said, well, it's that money's spent on other good things.
Josephson, I think, was one that said, they're spent on good things. Well, if it's good things, it should be appropriated, not just given to them and say, you spend it on what you think is good things. That's not how it works.
Yeah, it's an agency slush fund is essentially how it ends up. If they fall short someplace else or they want to do something new, they've got funds to do it with. But that's where you end up when legislators don't have a stake in the game. I mean, they say they do, but they don't. They don't have a personal financial stake in what's going on down there. Oil companies don't. I mean, yes, we say they'll spend it all, and they'll spend more. But if the oil companies say, look, you're going to tax me, I'm not funding your campaign anymore. You're going to tax me, I'm going to fund your opponent who's going to, stand up and say that we're not going to spend anymore. If I have to pay for spending, if you're going to restructure things so that if I have to pay for spending, I'm going to fund your opponent. Top 20% donors say, wait, you're going to tax me for this additional stuff? I'm not funding your campaign anymore. I'm funding your opponent. Non-resident industries.
You're making the argument to keep the status quo then at this point. That's the thing. You're making the argument to say if they're not going to get campaign contributions because they're going to change the system. I mean, that's part of the problem. It's baked in at this point.
It is baked in as long as they don't have to pay. As long as somebody doesn't have to pay. It is baked in because you continue to spend. Kelly Merrick will continue to propose amendments that spend more. Julie Colomb will continue to propose programs that spend more because they don't have to pay for it. Their donors, the oil companies, the non-resident industries don't have to pay for it. If they have to pay for it, there will be a different dynamic.
Oh man. All right. Well, I wish I had more solutions than what we just laid out there, because we've been talking about this for years on this program, and the problem still remains. Brad, final thoughts, 30 seconds here.
Well, Michael, I guess I would say nothing else has worked. I mean, yeah, we have been talking about these problems for over a decade now. Nothing has stopped it. And now we're seeing in this legislature that it's getting going again.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a surplus, so we got to spend it. We've got to find a way to stop it. And if there's a better way to stop it than what Jay Hammond thought, fine, let's adopt it. But we ought to try what Jay Hammond thought would help solve it.
Brad, thank you so much. Gotta go. Folks, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Duke Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is the Michael Duke Show, the Tuesday edition of the show. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and he came in and laid down some heavy stuff for us today. And it's got me thinking. More and more about The problem that we have here in this state, and the problem we have in the state, my friends, has everything to do with the appetite for spending. That's the problem in this state. We just cannot help ourselves. The politicians can't help themselves. The electorate who keeps electing the same politicians can't help themselves. They just want more. That's what it comes down to. More. They want more spending in every way. Brad was just talking during the break about, at one point, legislative finance said, okay, you guys are out of money. You've hit the end. There's no more budget. And then Kelly Merrick makes a proposal and an amendment to spend more money. We don't have any more, but that's okay. We're gonna spend it more. And again, this is a symptom of the great politician's disease, that we know better than you how to spend your money. We know better than you how to help your family, how to raise your kids, how to childcare your kids, how to educate, how to take care of you and your. I mean, it's just it is just the most infuriating thing to watch. Especially, like I said, and I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but I mean, I have specifically been talking about that this state has had a spending problem since 1999. I've been talking about this on the air. 25 years. 25 years we've been talking about this. And nobody listens. The politicians aren't listening, obviously. They've got a direction from their electorate. The electorate is either not engaged, not paying attention. They don't understand. Whatever it is. I mean, when you look at this graph that Brad Keithley brought up earlier this morning, for those of you who missed it, he brought a graph up that he's going to have in a chart that he brought up that's going to be in his weekly column, I'm sure. But when you look at this is the best case scenario. He is utilizing the absolute best case legislative finance division. Here's where we project things are going to go. I mean, we go from $5.53 billion in spending. He's saying it takes 5 years to get an additional $1 billion in spending. 6 years. I mean, I think just look at where we've come in just the last couple of years. And again, it's going to be exacerbated as you go forward. And by fiscal year 30, it's consuming 86% of the POMV draw, leaving 14%. And again, this is absolute best case scenario. The PFD will be gone. And then they'll be back to you, asking you with their hand out, saying, well, you guys have had a free ride for so long. Free rides die hard, right? You guys have had a free ride for so long. Now you need to pay your fair share. So there'll be a tax of some kind. And by that time, the PFD will be gone and there won't be any way to offset it. And here you are, wondering how we got here. I mean, it so absolutely infuriating to see what's going on. Quick reminder that today is the final day to make your vote in Fairbanks on the special election for Prop A, and that you should vote no on Prop A. Somebody vote for me, will you? Somebody go in and vote once for me. I can't vote. I own property in the borough. I'll be paying the taxes. But, yeah. I mean, that's all said and done. That's what it all comes down about. All right. Coming up in this hour, Chris Story is going to be joining us in about 30 minutes or so. We'll be picking things up with Chris and getting our weekly life coaching lesson. In the meanwhile, I guess that means we could talk to you about, whatever it is that you want to talk about. If you want to talk about this specific issue, I would love to hear it. If you want to talk with us about, the spending issue, the spending problem, I'm not opposed to that. Feel free to give us a call. We're going to open up the phone lines here and give you guys a chance to sound off and let your voice be heard, I guess is what I'm saying. So phone lines are now open. Now they're open. I just got them turned on. So if you'd like to call 319-527-3864, 319-527-3864. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say about any of that stuff. Okay. I'm going to have to fix something here. Oh, there we go. All right. There we go. Phone lines are open. You guys feel free to smile and dial and give us your thoughts on this. I mean, do you think Brad is out of line on this? Do you think that he is wrong on his analysis of where this is going? And again, I mean, I understand what Brad is trying to say, and he and I had a conversation over the top of the hour where I talked about, I've never shied away from the discussion of taxes, but my fear has always been that even if we do end up with a tax, that the appetite to spend is going to continue. Maybe it'll slow a little bit because the powers that be and the movers and shakers in Juneau, who are in that top 20+%, anywhere from the top 1% to the top 20%, they will feel a little bit more pain, but they are, I mean, have you ever seen something where, people feel righteous and justified? Right? They feel righteous about what they're doing. They feel righteous in knowing that they know better than you how to spend your money. And so maybe they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of their own wealth to say, well, we know better. We'll get this. We'll consume. And you want to see an outflow in Alaska? I mean, we're already seeing it now, right? You want to see a real outflow? Eliminate the entire PFD and then institute some form of income tax because we're just not paying our fair share. That's where we're at right now. That's what they're offering us. Even the best case scenario shows that in 5 years, the PFD is going to be greatly reduced, maybe even down to nothing. Best case scenario in 5 years, it's a fraction of what it was. And I just don't see people waking up. I don't know what it takes to wake people up. I mean, I have been wrong, folks. I will be first to admit it. There have been many times that I've been wrong. I fully expected that when Bill Walker vetoed half of the PFD, I fully expected the Senate to stand up and have an override vote and have a say in it, because I thought people would be, I thought people would just be outraged by it. Well, they didn't do it. And then I thought, well, then the people will be outraged at the Senate and the governor. And yet there was nothing. Now, I mean, I was heartened. I remember we went to was it the Iron Dog or the Iditarod? I think it was the Iron Dog that year that Bill Walker vetoed the PFD, and he stood up to address the crowd as a governor, as a luminary at this thing, and the entire crowd booed him. I mean, booed him. And I was like, okay, people are going to do something about it. They're going to stand up. But then it just went away. And here we are, 8-9 years later, and they're still taking the majority, the lion's share of the PFD. They're ignoring the law, just doing what they want to do. And don't you dare try and tell them what to do. Because again, they know better than us, right? They know better than us. And I've been wrong. I keep thinking that the silent majority, that quiescent silent majority, is going to stand up and stomp their feet and shake their fist and make their voice heard, and yet nothing happens. Nothing happens in the long run. We just continue on. Please, sir, may I have some more? Begging the state. And again, even with, and look, I want to say this. Let me say this up front. I really like Julie Colomb, the representative, the Republican representative from South Anchorage. I think she is an amazing lady. I could not disagree with her more on this whole child care thing. That is not government's job. Now, the tax incentives to incentivize businesses to maybe create their own child care program inside the business, that's one thing. Creating incentives, right? Tax incentives, that's one thing. But to expend government money and more oversight on child care providers and everything. I mean, the problem is that most of these child care providers, they don't want to or can't jump through all the hoops that the state's already laid out there. I mean, I'll be honest, if I had kids right now that were that age, that were child care age, and I needed to park them somewhere so that, Terry and I could go do our jobs or whatever, I wouldn't be looking for a state authorized, whatever child care. I'd find some grandmother down the street who wanted to make a few extra bucks. The market will bear that out. But we're going to expend state funding to prop up and subsidize the child care system in the state of Alaska because it's a crisis. The crisis is that we've got government involved in every aspect of our lives. And what used to be done by the neighbor down the street, who was, Susie Homemaker and stayed home with her kids, and so she could watch a couple more kids, or who was the retired, grandmother who, used to, who had time and wouldn't turn down an extra $50 a week or whatever it was to watch it. I mean, we've disincentivized all that. And we're creating a dependency welfare state here in Alaska. Dependency and welfare on the social safety side, the left, more progressive, what you would consider to be, what most people would consider to be welfare. And then also on the right, the corporate cronyist side, where you've got whole businesses that have built their entire business model off of sucking off the teat of government. They built the whole model off of government monies flowing into their coffers. If they had to compete in a true free market with all the other private businesses, they'd go bust. But they don't have to because they've got the inside track on sucking up and slurping up all that government lucre. We've created the dependency state. And it just gets worse every year. Do we have a revenue problem? Well, now we do, because the spending has grown so much that we can't, but it's always been a spending problem. It's always been a spending problem since the very beginning. And nobody wants to take it. Well, the governor tried to take a crack at it. Then he rolled over and wet on himself and said, I can't do that again. All right. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Frank says, you're right, Mike. The House voted on regulating private car dealership warranty work, which only adds to the cost of the individual. All in the name of protecting you, my friend. I mean, government does it all the time. We've got to pass this law to protect you. Protect who? Protect the people who are not smart enough to be able to take a look at something and do the whole caveat emptor thing, buyer beware, and do their own. Oh, we've got to protect them. I mean, it raises the cost for everyone and for everything, and it modifies and it damages the free market. But hey, it's going to raise the cost for everyone. But at least we're protecting people, right? You know how people learn? By doing stupid things. That's how you learn. You put your hand on that hot stove, and what do? You burn yourself. You learn not to do that. Government's idea is to hire somebody else to cook all your meals for you at 3 times the cost and slap your hand anytime you want to reach for the stove. That's their answer. Ken says, I have 2 uncles. One is dishonest, the other is stupid. They belong to different political parties. I won't say which, but I'm betting that voter turnout in Fairbanks today will be less than 20%. God, I hope not. I mean, we know it's a special election, so the turnout's going to be low, which is going to favor the special interests who are obviously motivated. The school groups are going to be, they're going to be all over this. But I hope that people would be motivated to say, I can't pay any more. You can't get blood from a stone. I cannot do any more than what I'm already doing property tax-wise. And this is after, by the way, they raised the assessed values to just astronomical amounts. I got a text on Monday night from a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a while. I saw him at the gun show, and he sent me I'm looking for the email. He says, we need to get out and vote on May 7th. Vote no. If we do not, our property tax will go out of sight. He says, my property taxes went up in the last 3 years, $130,000 in 3 years. And they want to open up the tax cap and add an extra $10 million on top of it, which again is outside the cap, which completely, and they had the opportunity to put this up against the tax cap. They got the 13 million. They could do all that. They had the crisis was averted, but they proceeded ahead. Why? Because the ultimate goal here is to not really fix the problem. It's to get access to more money. That's what it's all about. More. That's the roar. The more. And that's not just a one-time thing, folks. That's not just a one-time thing. That $10 million outside the cap continues to grow every year. You'll be paying that in perpetuity. And what is that? That $10 million, that's another 7% of the overall budget? So they've increased, every year. Every year. It is the secondary politician's disease. Spend it all. Spend every bit of it. Spend everything you have and then spend a little more. Legislative finance says, well, we're done. We're out of money. We've hit the revenue cap. And Kelly Merrick says, well, I've got one more. Of course you do. Because again, the burden is being spread across the backs of lower and middle income Alaskans. So of course you do. Of course you do. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Phone lines are open. Let's hit this thing.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. I'm getting a little spun up, which I guess if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right before Chris Story comes on board, right? That's the time to get spun up and talk about this. But I mean, again, this thing in Fairbanks right now all comes back to more, right? That we've got a $10 million shortfall for the schools. It's a crisis for the schools. So we need to have a special election to find that extra $10 million because that's the deficit. We need to do it right now. Mayor comes back and says, oh, by the way, we found $13 million in the couch cushions, and we could give you $9.4 million of it right now. Well, that's okay. We still need the special election. Why? More. Somebody in the chat room said, boy, I hope. He says, I'm thinking that the voting turnout today is going to be less than 20%. I hope I'm wrong. It may be 20%. If you're in Fairbanks and you're listening to my voice right now, did you vote today? Have you already early voted? If not, then go down and vote no. I mean, are you already paying property? Are you paying enough property taxes already? Yes? Do you want $10 million to go outside the cap and be affecting the size and scope of that for the next forever? Yes? Well, then vote no. Why did they proceed with the vote? Why did they proceed with the vote when they knew that the crisis was over? The mayor found the money. We'll send it to you now. We'll cut you the check. And as Melissa Burnett said yesterday, they really don't even need the money till December, so they had some time to make it. But why the crisis? Why get it up on a special election? More. We need more money. And then you get the crybabies out there who talk about, well, you can't shut down my school. My kid has great memories. I grew up there. I got married there. I did whatever it is, whatever the emotional attachment is to your local school. And they're like, no matter what happens, if there's only 3 kids, you need to still fund that place and make it work because that's my family. Stop being such an emotional ninny and realize that you can't justify a school when they've got 40 and 45% enrollment rates. I mean, that is the capacity rates of these schools. Melissa said there's a few that are at 60. But when most of them are less than half full, at some point, you've got to say, I think we should consolidate these. And if you eliminate 4 or 5 schools and your capacity is still only 55%, then maybe you need to consider closing a few more. I mean, I understand if the capacity is 75, 80%, now you got to start thinking about something else because there may be a surge and you got 20%, having a 20%, emptiness in a school is not necessarily, it's not great, but it's not bad because you may need that surge. But when you have a school that is less than half capacity, why are you not? Well, because people will lose their minds. I bought this home because the school was right down the street and my kids have gone there the whole time and they love it. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that your plans for did not work out in conjunction with everything. I'm just sorry that happened. And now your kid may have to ride the bus for 15 minutes to someplace else. But that's life. That's how it works. I used to have to ride the bus all the way out from Fox all the way into Joy Elementary in Fairbanks. And then they built a school out at Pearl Creek, and then they built a school out at the Fox, and then they, okay, great. But at some point when the things start to compress and condense again and contract, you have to adapt and you have to consolidate to make it work. And then to add insult to injury, the school board and the schools are spending your money to convince you to vote for the proposition. They don't even have to put paid by stuff on it, from what I understood. I mean, they're going to spend $100,000 educating the public on the benefits of voting yes. That's advocating to try and influence the outcome of election. That is the definition of politicking and electioneering. That is the definition. And yet APOC treats it like, well, they don't really need to. They're not really they are trying to influence the outcome of an election. If I took the ad at a radio station, I would have to fill out the federal form that said it is an issue ad trying to influence the outcome of an election. It's not educational, but we're going to spend $100,000 to do that. They're taking your money to try and convince you to go give them more of your money. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you, it's no guarantee that money's even going to be spent on schools. Save our schools. I mean, they could put in another addition on the $33 million puppy palace that they're building. $33 million for a dog facility. Really? Well, don't worry. The contractors are getting paid. The engineers are getting paid. All those people, they're sucking it up. They love it. $33 million. Yeah, and the school board chair accused our legislators of taking bribes. What happened to that? Nothing. It was a nothing burger. No apology. They all took collective responsibility. That was the letter that came out. Oh, we all take, and Melissa said, not me. That wasn't my words. But the letter from the board said, oh, we all take collective responsibility for the accusation of, I just never. So, long and the short of it is, vote no. Vote no today. If you feel like I pay enough in property taxes, if you feel like my assessment has gone up enough over the last 3, again, my friend sent me the text message, his assessment, $130,000 increase in 36 months. If you feel like you're paying, if you feel like it, if it's enough, it's enough. No to more. Because that's all this is. It's a money grab. It's a money grab, and it's just the decision that they need more. And again, as if you go back and listen to my interview yesterday with Melissa Burnett, she points out that she predicted that this whole crisis was coming because of what they did with the contracts and the agreements. And she said, this is going to create problems down the road. And their answer was, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Well, here we are 12 months later, and you're coming to the bridge. It's like you could see the bridge when you made the decision. They're weaponizing children, says Sourdough. Yes, of course they are. It's for the children. Like that's anything new. It's for the children. You got Jarrett Bryant and Jim Anderson at the Anchorage School District saying we're closing schools not because of the budgets, but because of enrollment. We don't have enough butts in the seats. We don't have enough. We've got way too many empty student spaces, and we can't justify it. And we should never have said that it was about budgets in the beginning, but that's what they did. They weaponized the crisis and said, this is about budgets. If only we had more budgets, we wouldn't have to shut down your schools. It's for the children. But they eventually came out and said, well, we should never have done that. That was wrong. It's really about enrollment. What did Melissa say yesterday? It's enrollment. When you've got schools that have less than 50% of their capacity being utilized, at some point you have to say, we need to sweep all these kids together into one building and make it more efficient. I mean, what are they saving? Like $4 million a year for each building that they close? I can't remember what the number was, but it's a significant chunk of money when they start closing buildings. Maybe we need to sell them off. Maybe we need to utilize them for another purpose. I mean, on top of the fact, don't even get me started on the deferred maintenance of this stuff, that we got buildings all over the borough in Fairbanks that we're spending money on or should have been spending money on, and we still have $250 million in deferred maintenance on these buildings. More. All right. So the long and the short of it is, get out there today if you're in Fairbanks and vote no. Just go out there and vote no. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story is up next.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. The Michael Moore show this morning. I don't know who Michael Moore is. Sorry. Ryan. Moore. Oh, I see. It's the Michael Moore show today. Yeah, now I got it. Moore. I need to get like a lion roar or something. It's more, you know. What I got here? Got anything? Can I do this right there? How about this one? Right there. Right there. Ready? What do we need? We need yes. Oh man, that's what we need. We need more. All right. Okay. Well, let's get Story on the horn here, shall we? See what he's got going on. Let's get him balskvad of a. All right. Let's see. We can get him rolling here. Fingers crossed. It all works. Hey, look at that. Look at that.
How come you're using a German accent when you start talking about calling me?
If we're going to call the quiz Story, good morning, sir. How are you?
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, mein Freund. Was ist jetzt los mit dir?
All right, I'm out.
Yeah.
Da, du bist in Prasse.
Da, du bist in Prasse. Oh,
so my grandpa used to call me.
Yeah. Danke schön. All right. You sound like Natasha. All right. Hello, Chris. How are you, friend?
Good morning, Michael. I am absolutely relaxed and just on top of the world. I just have been looking forward to this moment since I don't know, maybe I was born. I think this is the moment I was born to be on your program right now.
It's
This
possible.
moment. This is it.
It's possible
This is it.
that you were born to be on this program. It's very possible.
Today, at this moment.
I just realized that your thing here crashed. Your little blurb where I put your name and stuff in it. Let me do this. HomerAlaska.com. All right. Now I got to fix this and change that. So what are we talking about today, Mr. Miss? They call him Mr. Story. What of a what's the word, Bird? What are we talking about?
Connections.
Connections. Okay. All right.
Connections. Yeah.
The
power of connection.
The power of connections. I can do that.
Hello?
All right.
Hello?
Is this thing
Hello?
on? Is this thing on? All right.
Irony.
I'm sorry. I mean, it is irony. I'm doing three things, man. I'm trying to talk and everything else. How was your weekend? I guess I should ask that. How was the weekend for you?
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Just working like a dog. We're remodeling a house. And so it's, just nonstop. It feels like a never-ending fuse has been lit, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Does it?
And I'm sure it's not a train.
I was just going to say, does it look like a train? That's the question. You saw the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's getting bigger.
It's
coming at me.
It's getting better, but it may or may not be a train at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's funny. You get into a project like it just becomes all-consuming in your off hours and weekends, and I enjoy it. I do. It's been a while since we've actually, physically done this ourselves, and I'm enjoying the process though. It's good to get back into the tools, as they say.
Good. All right. Well, let me. Man, my life just so messed up. Okay, let me get Chris scored away here and see if we can pull all this together. I don't know why stuff just breaks sometimes. Chris, explain that to me. How does that work? Stuff just breaks arbitrarily out of the blue.
It's just there to test your ability to fix it. You're a problem solver.
I am a problem. I don't know about a problem solver, but I am a problem. All right. I am the wild child. I am definitely trying to fix this. Okay. And there we go. All right. So I got you up there, Chris. You're all ready to go. We will continue. Anything else you want to tell us before we let you go? Why does it say Willie Wolf? Damn it. Sorry. That's
Willie's a cool guy. I don't mind that.
Yeah, well, that's fine. We'll get it going on. Okay. All right. Well, we'll fix it here and we'll make it show. Chris Story. I love HomerAlaska.com. That's where you go to see him. We'll see if we can make that work. All right, Chris, we'll continue here. Don't go anywhere. This whole thing is a train wreck. 12 seconds away. Chris Story joins us, and I've already forgotten what he's going to talk to us about, so we'll pick it up on the other side. How about that? That's exactly how we're doing it. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Here we go. Okay, well, it's that time of the week, that time of the show. Chris Story, the man from Homer, comes on board to share with us his thoughts on, well, all kinds of stuff. But usually it's something positive. We need him to uplift us and drag us out of the dirt because we've been down in the muck so much. He's not going to talk about more, although he should. He should, Chris Story joins us for our weekly uplift and life coaching lesson. Hello, my friend. How are you this morning?
Michael, good morning. I'm on top of the world, ready to roll. I wanted to talk about the power of connections, which I feel it right now. You and I have this mental melding happening right now. It's like a Vulcan mind meld. I can feel it.
Is that where that suction sound is coming from? Okay.
That's right. That's
Then,
right.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So tell me, my friend, what about the power of connection makes it all work for us? Let's just dive right in, shall we?
I was listening to an interview with a pastor, and this pastor was talking about public speaking. And when you think about it, pastors publicly speak every week, sometimes multiple times a week. They're constantly in the public sphere. They're publicly speaking all the time. And he said a lot of people have come to him over the years and want to talk about how they could become a better or more effective public speaker. And he said something that I thought was really incredible. And it's so true. And I've gone to seminars, I've practiced public speaking. I've got a dozen books on the topic. I've taken a master class on the subject of public speaking, but I've never heard it put so succinctly and perfectly as this particular pastor. And he said, really, the only skill that you need to master if you really want to become an effective public speaker, the only skill you need to master and work on and practice and hone is connecting to people. That's it. You don't need to worry about where you put your hands. You don't need to be worrying about what type of prompts you're using, or the lapel microphone versus a handheld, or where do you move which side of the stage, this, that, and the eye contact. If you're focused on connecting to people and making deeper connection, be it through storytelling, your story, or talking about something with facts that you really care about, if you connect with people, you'll become an effective public speaker. And I started thinking, well, on a deeper level, it's the same thing one-on-one. In life, as in business, as in public speaking, as in relationships, the more you can connect one-to-one with somebody else, the deeper that connection is, the more meaningful life becomes, the less disregard, I guess you could say, for humanity you'll have. You'll have more regard. You'll have more deeper connections. Coincidentally, totally opposite end of the spectrum, Gary Vaynerchuk, or he's on online handle known as Gary V. He curses like every third syllable. He throws the F-bomb in there. He's so total opposite of a pastor. And he said something else that I thought was interesting. This all kind of converged over the weekend while I was listening to interviews while I was working. And he said, Gary V said, social media didn't make us divided. Social media didn't create that nasty noise that so many of us decry about social media. He said it revealed us. It reveals you. Social media reveals what you're already thinking, but weren't willing to say to somebody's face, but you feel from behind a keyboard, you can say it. And I thought, wasn't that interesting? And he went on to say, you can make a deeper connection with people in humanity and learn through social media, through the internet, through this World Wide Web, just as easily as you can reveal yourself as being an angry, nasty, hateful person. You can go the opposite extreme and make connections. And so I thought, isn't that interesting? Whether it's from the stage or the page or social or in person, you can make a deeper connection with people around you just by paying attention to it. And I think if you think about, I want to learn the skills of getting a better job, or I want to brush up on my interview skills on my resume, or I want to become more, I want to have more meaningful work in my life. The more connections you can make, the deeper you're going to go in the work you're already doing, and or new opportunities are going to reveal themselves because you've made authentic, genuine connections with real people in the world.
I mean, Gary Vee is saying basically social media has destroyed a lot of us paying attention to things, right? We're like ADD kids now. It's like, what squirrel? I mean, we can't focus on anything for any length of time.
Well, yes and no. I think his deeper point was that it just revealed who we are relative to the divide and the angry piece of it. Yeah, I mean, obviously the endless scroll, I can't remember who it was, but somebody, it was either Facebook or one of these apps that he said the designer of the endless scroll said it was one of the most detrimental things he did to humanity was create that endless scroll where you can just get sucked in. But it's also a powerful tool. It's somewhere you can go to learn. It's somewhere you can go to give and offer genuine advice to the world, or offer beautiful pictures, or share your art, or just go to learn. We don't have to just go there and reveal how upset we are with the world, or how angry we are, or how vitriolic or vindictive, or whatever. We can go there and do something genuine and make deeper connections. It's not a place you want to stay a lot. I mean, it's a little bit like, I think people just using social media, for example. I think you're a good example of this. You use it as a tool to distribute your program, and then you walk away from it. It's a little bit like Oprah Winfrey. Just because she made her $1 billion mark on television, I'll bet she doesn't watch it 9 hours a day. She uses it as a tool. And I think if you go to get something from it, and or go to give something from social media, or go to learn, like I said, you can make those connections. I've got friends that I've made through the internet. So I started thinking about it. He's like, really right. You can use this as a tool. Just a great example, and I keep coming back to him because he impressed me so much. Jim Stovall recently. I connected to him through the internet. Absent the internet, I probably never would have been able to make a connection to him, have him as a guest on my program, tell me this amazing story about an Alaskan who got a kidney because of him, and it wasn't his kidney. All these kinds of things. I have a deep connection now with him as a result of the internet. But it's the same with people you see in the coffee shop. We can ignore them. I mean, have you ever been in conversation and somebody looks down at their phone? Instantly, connection's gone. Or they look at their smartwatch. Instantly, the connection is gone. So each of us can practice what this pastor is talking about, making a deeper connection with each other in the world. Whether, again, you want to be a public speaker or not, it doesn't matter. You can have that deeper one-on-one connection with people just by noticing it and paying attention. You ever notice when you're on vacation, you run into somebody from your hometown or your state or what have you, and suddenly you have a connection. Now, that person might not give you the time of day, or you them in your hometown, but once you see each other out in another state or another place, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I know you. We have a connection. And then, like I say, you get back home, it's like, forget about it.
Well, I mean, let's face it. One of the few things, I mean, if I'm lying on my deathbed, I'm not thinking about my Maserati in the garage or whatever. I'm thinking about the people that I met, the lives that I affected, the connections that I made. I mean, that's the important stuff that you're going to take into eternity. I mean, in my opinion, connecting with people and having that connection is important in everything we do.
And think about after 9/11, Americans felt a deep connection to each other like I've not seen before in my lifetime. It probably was more closely aligned, or closest aligned to World War II, the connection that the Americans felt with each other across all political spectrums, across races, across divides, whatever it be. We felt a deep, deep connection. Didn't last very long, and we unfortunately used that connection to pass some really dangerous things like the Patriot Act and so forth in the internal spying. But nevertheless, just forget that for a minute and just focus on that connection that we each had. And we needn't wait for a calamity or crisis to go back to that connection. So if you disagree with somebody and you're diametrically opposed politically or socially, you've got issues, I'll guarantee in the Venn diagram of your life, there's probably at least 20% of an agreement you can come to. And remember what Galileo said. He said, I've never met a man so ignorant that I couldn't learn something from him. Each of us has something to learn and or teach, and will not know it. Now, of course, Galileo had never met Joe Biden. Let's just stipulate that right now. So there could be an asterisk next to that quote. But point is that, we should be able to come together, disagree on certain things, still maintain a connection. And who knows, you might actually have some influence over somebody who is so inept in their ability to critically think. If you'll connect with them, you're going to have a deeper chance, or a more sincere chance, of actually having a connection and changing and altering the course of their life for the better.
I mean, I guess I would say in my profession, because I essentially work in sales, right? I mean, I do the radio show and everything else, but I'm also a marketing consultant, and I advertise, I do advertising, and
but here on the show, you're also selling ideas.
Yeah, well. I'm just saying that connection, though, and you're right, even on the show, the connection with the listener is important. But in my day-to-day life, I find that things, that when I can connect with somebody on some level, we can have an honest, true conversation. I mean, and we can affect things, right? When we make a connection, we can affect the circumstance if we make that connection. Am I saying that right? Am I reading it?
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. 100%. I think Michael, we're connecting right now. We are on the same page. And I think if we look at it individually, so my philosophy is the backyard millionaire, meaning, in other words, you can make a fortune where you are with what you've got right here, right now. You can make a connection. You can make a difference in the country. You can make a difference in the world where you are with what you've got starting today. Just practice. See, I'm going to make 3 connections today. I'm going to connect with 3 people that I might otherwise have ignored. I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing people's life stories. I love being in line with somebody at the coffee shop and actually connecting for just a quick minute. Like, wow. Oh, and you never know what you're going to learn from somebody seated next to you on the airplane. Sometimes I just like, I just want to sleep or I just want to read this book. And then suddenly I've got a connection with somebody. And it's actually quite endearing to say, look, I can make a difference. I don't have to go to DC or Juneau to make a big difference. I can make a difference right here in my own community, in my own backyard, and connecting with each other is the nucleus of all of that.
Chris Story, the man from Homer, is our guest. We're talking about making connections in life and what it does for us. Chris, I appreciate you coming on board. I Love Homer, Alaska is the where you go to find him. If you want to connect with Chris, that's where you go. And then get your book,
Amen.
The Backyard Millionaire Maker, about to come out. Is it ready? Quickly.
Yeah. Proofs are on their way to me, and it'll be live here probably within the next week.
Can't wait. Chris Story, thank you, my friend. Good to hear from you.
Thank you, Michael.
Folks, we'll be back tomorrow. Mike Shower and more. The Michael Duke Show. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. All right. Chris so rudely just hung up on me. It's okay. I feel you. All right, my friends. Well, that does it for me today. I'm out of time. And we got to go. We will see you tomorrow. Again, be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Bye.